The Shenyang J-8 and its variants, known to NATO as the Finback, are a family of third-generation Chinese fighters. Both in real life and in War Thunder, these aircraft are certainly unique and offer a fascinating insight into the history of Chinese aviation. Join me in this video as we take a dive into this family of interesting planes, going over their history and how to play them. In the early 1960s, during the Sino-Soviet split, the People's Republic of China wanted to develop a successor to their newly acquired J-7s, being license-built MiG-21s. In 1964, this led to two projects. One of these was the J-9, an ambitious project for a lighter fighter that, while advanced, didn't go anywhere for a very long time, eventually inspiring the J-10 much later. The other, which we're more interested in today, was the J-8. It was to be a larger, heavier fighter, acting as a long-range interceptor to deal with large fleets of bombers, and was to be based on the J-7. With the design, the engineers seemed to take the orders of enlarge the J-7 a little too literally. When the first prototypes were completed in 1968, they presented this. Shenyang's engineers had, in effect, glued two J-7s together, creating the absolute fat ass that was the early J-8. MiG-21? Nah, they had the big 21. Regardless, the J-8 managed to lumber into the sky for its first test flight in 1969, but work was soon halted due to political turmoil, resulting in Shenyang's design team being dissolved and work halting for nearly a decade. It wasn't until March 1980 that the design was officially certified, and as such the J-8 was now already horribly outdated. It featured two WP-7 turbojets, a range-finding radar, and two 30mm cannons. NATO, not easily fooled into thinking this was just a closer photo of a MiG-21, bestowed the reporting name of Finback to this strange creature. The first attempt to remedy the J-8's shortcomings was made with the J-8A. This was a Swedish biplane that sits at rank 1 and... Oops, wrong J-8A. The actual J-8A featured a Type 204 fire control radar, an ejection seat, a twin-barrel 23mm cannon, and the provision to carry PL-2, PL-5B, and PL-4 missiles, the latter of which turned out to be a complete dud. This finished testing in November 1985, but still did not meet the PLAAF's requirements, so production was cut short in 1987. After a requirement set in 1980, work began in 1982 on a significant rework of the J-8 from the ground up. Called the J-8B, it looked very different from its predecessor, retaining the same rear fuselage but adding a completely new forward end, with two lateral air intakes and a large radar, as well as a huge new tail fin. The first prototype of this took flight in 1984 and continued testing for 4 more years. It was found to have a higher thrust-to-weight ratio and better handling, as well as a Type 208 pulse radar, which it used in conjunction with Aspids procured from Italy, domestically produced as PL-11s, and supplemented with PL-2, PL-5B, C and E, and PL-8 infrared homing missiles. Despite this, the PLAAF was still not convinced about the J-8B's capabilities and reached out to Grumman, under the Peace Pearl program, to integrate Western avionics into it. These were modified and tested in the United States, but for political reasons this was canned in 1989, with the Chinese only learning valuable lessons instead of receiving aircraft. Instead, a production run of 54 standard J-8Bs followed in 1992 for 3 years, before being upgraded with a strengthened airframe that could carry heavier payloads to the J-8B Batch 2, which became the definitive J-8B. The J-8B's most notorious escapade was that of Lieutenant Commander Wang Wei, who, while intercepting an EP-3E signals intelligence aircraft off the coast of Hainan Island, got slightly too carried away with maneuvers and slammed J-8B number 81194 into the side of the American aircraft. Wang's finback was destroyed and he went MIA, presumed dead. The P-3, on the other hand, was forced to make an emergency landing on Hainan, where the crew were detained for over a week until the US apologized to China for the death of Wang and for violating their airspace. Later, images of Wang flying J-8B number 81192 went viral in China, and the number 81192 has become an icon for both the PLANAF and China as a whole. Curiously, the default J-8B skin in War Thunder also bears this number. In War Thunder, the J-8B sits at rank 7 in the Chinese tree, just after the J-7E. Being 11.3, it sits at the same BR as the J-7E, and was added in the Wind of Change update. Armed with 4 missiles, up to 4 PL-5Bs and 2 Aspids, the J-8B is a decent plane, but not quite a standout at its BR. It's also huge, being one of the largest aircraft at rank 7, not counting wingspan. Despite this, it has excellent acceleration, and you can reach its maximum speed of 1,365 km an hour fairly easy, being able to out-accelerate an F-4E, although the Finback's lower top speed will mean the Phantom catches you eventually. Despite its large size and unwieldy appearance, the J-8B is certainly no slouch in dogfighting, being able to beat F-4 Phantoms and even give some F-5s a run for their money. That said, if you're looking for a Chinese 11.3 to dogfight in, the J-7E really does blow everything else out of the water. To help with your survivability, you have 64 large caliber countermeasures. While this isn't a huge amount, it'll be sufficient for most of your engagements. Onto your missiles. Your PL-5Bs are the same as those found on the J-7D and E, and are quite capable. With a very powerful motor behind them, they're great at chasing down fleeing opponents. This does come with a downside. They don't pull very hard off the rail, so you're likely going to have to lead your target a little if you want them to hit maneuvering targets more easily. Your Aspids, meanwhile, are those found on the Italian F-104S ASA. Unlike that plane, you don't have to trade a gun for a guidance kit for them, and can fire them without any sacrifices. They're a fairly average semi-active radar homing missile, with CW illumination that allows your missiles to track a little after your opponent chaffs. This is helpful as your radar isn't great. Lacking pulse Doppler capability, it can be quite easily defeated with a single pop of chaff. Your radar is I-band, meaning that almost every plane can detect you, so you're not going to be catching many people off guard, unless they lack chaff or a brain. The final bit of kit to talk about is your rather abysmal radar warning receiver. The SPO-10 certainly leaves much to be desired, not giving you target ID or even launch warnings, and only having 4 sectors. In your average match of AirRB, you're better off flying in at a medium altitude. You don't have to fly at treetop height, but flying too high can end in you headbutting a missile from something with a PD radar, especially in up tiers where you can face the F-4J and the FA-18A. For your Aspids, you can use them in one of 2 ways, either against targets that aren't paying enough attention, or have rather poor RWRs, like the MiG-23MLs that have the same as you, or against targets that are low on energy and close, as even chaffing won't save them from the CW illumination. For your PL-5Bs, they are great for killing targets that are either unaware of you or out of flares. They're very good at chasing targets down, and against some afterburning twin-engine planes like the Phantom, can even ignore a couple flares. Finally, your cannon, being a Gush 23 garden hose, is quite good for ambushing your opponents, especially those already engaged in a dogfight. While the J-8B was being developed, work was also underway on the J-8D. This added the capability for in-flight refueling, and first flew in 1990. It was developed specifically with land-based naval operations in mind. As both the B and the D lacked true BVR capability, a J-8C was being considered, aiming to bring true multi-role capability to the J-8 family. Unfortunately, it was axed after a handful of prototypes, with China instead opting to purchase Sukhoi Su-27s from the USSR, which would end up being developed into the J-11. Shenyang did not abandon the J-8 and instead looked into new ways of improving the nearly 80 J-8Bs and Ds that had been produced. Some survivors were fitted with the new Type 1471 radar and was designated the J-8BH or DH respectively, as well as a small batch of 24 J-8H fighters being produced in the early 2000s. This was quickly superseded by the J-8F, development of which had begun in 1997. It introduced a new Type 1492 pulse Doppler radar, which was compatible with the brand new PL-12 active radar homing missile, an advanced weapon that brought fire and forget capability to the J-8F. A new cockpit was also devised, featuring MFDs and a HUD, whilst the power plant was made up of two WP-13B2 engines. Around 56 J-8Fs were built from 2003, and a number of J-8Ds were brought up to that same standard as the J-8DF. The J-8F is still in service with the PLAAF, although in recent years has been relegated to backline roles and is actively being replaced by the more advanced J-11 family. In War Thunder, the J-8F sits at rank 8 in the Chinese air tree, being just after the J-8B. At 13.0, it's a fair bit higher than its predecessor, but certainly makes up for that with its upgrades. First of all, we'll go over your airframe. With over 1 ton of extra thrust from your upgraded engines, you'll enjoy a higher thrust-to-weight ratio, and even the very rare ability to supercruise, break the sound barrier without your afterburner, provided you're on the deck and you're not heavily laden. This also means your performance in dogfights is universally better than the J-8B. However, while your upgrades are nice, most of your competition has gotten significantly more. Pretty much all 4th gens will absolutely turn circles around you, and most have a higher top speed, whilst yours is still unchanged. Overall, these changes are certainly welcome, but they're not the reason the J-8F is up here. Your most important changes are to your weapons and avionics. For the latter, you'll find a new radar and RWR. Your radar is the Type 1492, which is a very welcome pulse Doppler radar, being the first one on a PLAAF aircraft in the game. While it's not the best radar in the game, it certainly suffices for what you use it for, supporting HMS, having a decent 75km range, and supporting up to 6 data link targets, although you're never going to use more than 2. Your RWR is the KJ8602A, the same as found on the JH7A, J10A, and J11B. This is a modern digital RWR that will be able to ID basically every threat leveraged at you, allowing you the situational awareness you'd come to expect from a high-tier jet. In addition to your 64 large caliber countermeasures, you also have 84 regular ones. Next up are your weapons. The J-8F can carry 6 missiles, up to 2 of which are active radar homing ones. We'll go over your IR missiles first. When the J-8F first released, its gimmick was that it could carry 6 PL-8s and sling them at people with its HMS. This was neat and made for an interesting plane that functioned like the Kurnas 2000. However, when Fox 3s were added, the J-8F was one of the first to receive them, and as such it was moved up in BR. There, it was a mixed bag. Lacking IRCCM missiles meant that once it had fired off its 2 good missiles, usually resulting in 2 free kills, it was essentially relegated to being food for the more capable fighters around it. This only changed very recently when it was bestowed PL-5E2s, which are essentially all-aspect IRCCM PL-5s. These are very capable, especially at chasing down targets, as effective flaring usually requires targets to not fly directly away from you, allowing you to accelerate towards them and catch them easier. They do, like their earlier variants, require a bit of aiming with your airframe, especially at closer ranges, but you'll find them very capable should you use them right. Your next weapon is the aforementioned PL-12, which is currently China's primary ARH missile. This is a really solid, all-around ARH missile, and is most functional at less than 20 kilometers of range. It is rather comparable to the AMRAAM, trading a little bit of range for a noticeable increase in pull. You can carry up to 2 of these, and they'll likely be your main source of kills. Now, to go over how to play the J-8F. At the start of the match, you'll want to use your great acceleration and speed to get some good positioning. As you only have 2 Fox 3s, you're better off avoiding early match BVR and instead saving them for more guaranteed kills. You'll find if you launch them at targets less than 10 kilometers away and above the multipath height, they're almost a guaranteed kill unless the target is already in a good angle to notch. For locking targets at closer range, I'd avoid messing around with TWS and instead focus on using either the HMD or ACM modes on your radar. The HMD gives you more control, but the ACM feels significantly better at filtering stuff out. If you get opportunities to use them, don't forget about your PL5E2s. They're very good and have a much longer reach than most other Fox 2s. If you're running low on missiles, don't be afraid to go back to the runway whenever you feel like you can. You're going to lose most engagements that require you to win a dogfight the old-fashioned way, as your gun is still the Gush 23, which leaves much to be desired in terms of damage, and your airframe isn't quite up to the task against most foes. As your 13.0, you can't face planes such as the Rafale anymore, but most of your matches will be either 13.7 or 14.0, which kinda sucks. Because of this, I'd only really recommend playing the J-8F if it interests you, as compared to the things it fights, it's just not really that stellar. If down tiers were more common, it would be significantly better, but in the present state of affairs, it's just not. Once you've got your J8s, you'll want to get them spaded. For the J8B, start with flares and chaff and PL5Bs. Grab the new boosters and wings repair. To reach rank 4, go back and get the offensive 23mm and then the new 23mm cannons. Once you have those, grab the speed, G-suit, engine, and compressor. Finish off your flight performance by grabbing the fuselage repair and the airframe, then spade it by going for EFS and your ground ordnance. For the J-8F, start with flares and chaff and the PL5E2s, as well as the G-suit and new boosters. Grab wings repair, followed by PL8s. You won't be using these, as the PL5E2s are better, but you'll need them to get to rank 4. Continue by grabbing engine, compressor, cover, airframe, and fuselage repair. After that, you can grab EFS before finishing off with the PL5Bs and the ground ordnance. With both of those out of the way, that's all of the J8 family spaded for you. And that's it for the J8 family as it currently stands in War Thunder. While in the future we may see other J8s, such as the J8A, we've reached the limits of what Gaijin has bestowed upon us for now. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, then liking and subscribing would mean a lot to me. If you'd like to vote on the next video's topic, there'll be a poll in my Discord, link in the description. And that's all from me. I've been girltwink, fly safe.